All right, welcome everyone to another episode of the EsportsNext podcast. I am joined by my co-host, as always, the lovely founder of the Esports Trade Association, Miss Megan Van Petten, MVP. And today we are joined by our guest, who is the head of the Sri Lanka chapter. I want to say nearly half a world away, but maybe further than that, as I was looking at some flight times. We have Amila Pathirana, hailing from Colombo, Sri Lanka, who is the co-founder and CEO of GamerTech. It was wonderful seeing you at the conference in person, and it's wonderful seeing you again today online. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, and thank you for that. Yes, it was lovely meeting both of you at the conference. It was one of a kind of experiences that I've had. Never been to one of these sports next before. It was quite entertaining. Plus, lovely to meet all the people in person. Actually,
Absolutely. I find it makes such a major difference just meeting people in person
Yeah.
than, seeing each other online. We see everybody's face nowadays, whether it's on LinkedIn or Twitter, Instagram, Zoom, but there's just something to the in-person interaction, shaking somebody's hand, talking to them in person. And I was looking at flight times just now, Amila. Looks like we're a solid 22 hours away
Yeah.
yes,
flight
yeah,
time, which is pretty mind-boggling. So I think you win the award of the longest travel time to the Esports Next conference. I don't know if you win or lose with that, but that's quite a journey.
yeah. It's kind of it's a bit of a trip. It's a bit of a trip. At least I enjoy the flight food and then the in-flight entertainment. So
Yeah, plenty of time to get some work done, I'm sure. I'm curious, as we said, you are the chair of our Sri Lanka chapter. How did you find out about the Esports Trade Association from the outset?
yes, so I've been working in esports for the last 5 years. I mean, like dedicatedly working in this space, right? Earlier, my jobs got me involved in terms of gaming and esports, but was never a full-time role. What happened was 5 years ago when I founded GamerTech, one of the struggles was like, okay, you're in a very different country where the esports industry hasn't evolved as much as the US market. And I was looking for an organization which can help me connect with like-minded people, give us an opportunity to sort of, learn from the industry. So that got me searching. And then, obviously my first place to go and look was Google, and here it comes. I was especially looking for a trade association. And the reason for that was like you have a lot of associations which are not trade related, but more in terms of gaming, players, things like that. But I was especially looking for someone on the trade side because I understood that that is the place to meet and connect with people. And that's how I found the Sports Trade Association. The moment I found it, I think I reached out via the support at Esports Trade Association email. Then I got a response. Then I understood how to set up the membership. And yes, and the rest is history. So we become a member. Now we are trying to set up the Sri Lanka chapter. So things have moved forward since then.
Wonderful, and I'm so glad that you did, and it's been wonderful to get to know you. The global reach of our EST chapters are much of the efforts of MVP here, who does such a good job of thinking beyond just our United States to a very global view. For our listeners who do not have a globe in front of them or a world
Yeah.
map, I believe Sri Lanka is just southeast of India. Is that right?
Yeah. So Sri Lanka is actually the most southern part of India. And I think in the ancient history, I think there was a bridge between Sri Lanka and India. So it was kind of like in the same not just in the same continent, but it was also kind of connected. But obviously, Sri Lanka is a different nation, has its own national language, which is different to what India speaks. Very different country, relatively very small as well. It's 65,000 square kilometers. It's almost like most only 1/10 of the size of Texas.
Wow.
And yeah, and about 22 million population. It's a very small country, actually.
Yeah, so we have seen that India has a pretty strong esports community, very
Yeah.
mobile first. There's been a number of
Yes.
teams, competitions. PUBG Mobile, I know, is huge out there. How
Yeah.
does the esports industry differ from more the mainland India versus Sri Lanka just to the south?
Yeah. So Sri Lanka, in terms of esports, there are certain things we've done that makes us very advanced. For example, esports is registered as a national sport in the country, so it's recognized by the Sri Lankan government as a sport in the country, which
Wow.
is most probably one of the first in this region. But it still involves a lot of uh, semi-professional, non-professional aspects, and there's only one organization which is actively working on the grassroots level, which is called Gamer.lk, which is founded by a person called Ravin Vijaytilaka. And obviously, he's going to be part of the founding board of Sri Lanka chapter as well, because I've spoken to him. So he's currently in China for one of the esports tournaments, because he's flown in with the Sri Lanka PUBG team, who's competing in the international tournament in China at the moment. And
Hmm.
so from a industry point of view, it's competitive driven still, but there aren't any professional organizations which are set up to monetize and then also build communities. So at the moment, the community is driven by the gamers themselves, but there aren't any professional organizations in Sri Lanka at the moment, like what we have in US, like, professional esports organizations. It's non-existent in Sri Lanka. So in that way, we are also very backwards. And I think there are two problems to that. One is in terms of corporate side support, understanding of the corporate sector in Sri Lanka about the opportunities and the way to build an industry in terms of esports and gaming. And the second part is also to do with the government or the policymakers understanding what esports can mean to Sri Lanka. Even though
Right.
Sri Lanka is a smaller nation in comparison to India, obviously India is a 1 billion population, makes everything very attractive for someone to go and start exploring there because it's a billion population, whereas Sri
Sure.
Lanka is 22 million. But on the flip side to this is where I see the opportunities that Sri Lanka is actually strategically located to work with countries like Pakistan, Bangladesh. Combined, you're looking at about almost like 450 million population again in that region, which makes it very interesting. And even like if you take countries like Nepal, very early stages of esports trade, early stage of getting professional esports organizations. But I think that's
Yeah.
where the opportunity I see, and that's one of the reasons why I want to set up the Sri Lanka chapter as well. It gives us an opportunity to connect with grassroots level people and then get them to come to the forefront and start building communities, start building opportunities together.
Right. Well, you mentioned some challenges about being a little further back in the growth phase, if you will, or
Yeah,
some other countries. I'm curious to get your take on the positive aspects of that, because sometimes what you may have is like in the States, right, or kind of we're going through this esports winter, people are calling it, right? Where
yeah,
you've had a lot of people who've raised a bunch of money, and you know the investors are looking for the return on their investment. There's different mergers, acquisitions happening. Some teams are going out of business. We're
yeah,
figuring out what is that sustainable business model and what are those revenue opportunities outside of sponsorship. Um, but if you're a little bit behind that curve, you may have avoided a lot of heartache,
yeah,
maybe a lot of
yeah.
headaches of raising the capital, having it kind of drop off a little bit. Tell me a little bit, how do you see that from a silver lining standpoint, that you're able to see some of these other countries in other parts of the world trying things before you are there and you're able to avoid some of those mistakes?
Yeah, and so like all the challenges that I was talking in my head are also actually opportunities. And the reason I'm saying is like because I've been involved in the industry for a while now, and I've been working with some of the leading names within the industry, and it has given me a great opportunity to learn, understand what they go through, and then also understanding same exact challenges that you're talking about. Some organizations able to raise capital but can't, really get a return on that investment because you still don't have like enough revenue streams as like traditional sports is like a classic example, right? You still can make a lot of money with, different streams of revenue. Esports organizations haven't been able to most probably monetize on apart from like, sponsorship, they haven't been able to monetize. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for us to learn from that and then apply it in a more sensible way in Sri Lanka. And I think when I spoke about the corporates are having the lack of understanding of the industry, I think that's slowly changing because, like, again, classic example. 5 years ago, if I went to any other Sri Lankan corporate and said, "Hey, I have this vision of, setting up a company that could do wearables and performance apparel for gamers. And they're like, who are gamers? These are the nerdy kids, playing in the basement. Sri Lanka doesn't necessarily have basements per se, but
Yeah.
the nerdy kids who doesn't want to come
Right.
out and get in sunlight, right? But the perceptions are changing. They've seen what's happening in the world. I think, sorry, it's it's kind of changing, and I think we have to be, as a trade, we have to educate them, and that's one of the opportunities that I see. The more you educate them, the more you show them there are opportunities. There are people who's willing to come forward and start investing. Then the other part is also, I think Sri Lanka has a lot of talented kids in terms of esports, but the problem is that we are also a smaller economy. Because of that, they kind of have to work full time and then play maybe overnight, which doesn't
Sure.
give them necessarily the sort of like professional development they would need
Mm.
to be a
The
professional
14
player.
hours a day just to
Yeah,
play
yeah,
games and grind it out.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think if we when some of the tournaments start coming in, and then with trade being there, I think some of the publishers would take this market a little bit serious. And I think with that, there's an opportunity for them to really get into like professional gaming. With that, I would also assume like the sponsors would follow. Now you suddenly have an avenue that it wasn't available. And I think there's traditional challenges most of the corporates have. One thing is that they're having an increasingly disengaged younger audience that they're trying to sell to. What better way to go and really connect with an audience when you are part of esports, and especially as a gaming as a whole, I think it gives a lot of different opportunities. And from a social point of view, I also think it gives an outlet for young kids to really start developing themselves, because not everyone can be a professional athlete, right? And not
Mhm.
everyone can be educated to the extent that it's going to create such a big monetary income. So I think having an avenue like this for someone who's good at things, but also like really give them an outlet to sort of get into international careers, and then also like get picked up by some of the international esports teams. I mean, if you look at some of the US teams, most of them are not really US origin players. They are, that's because I mean, like the industry has changed such that you have the ability of getting opportunities across the world. I think those are some of the great opportunities that Sri Lanka as a whole can explore. I mean, like I have two sons. One of the things I keep telling my elder son, who's 10 years old, is he's already started playing Rocket League. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, I know you need to do your studies, but there's also an opportunity now. You get to go to university, get scholarships, because I've seen how I've been working with some of the professors from some of the universities, and I think that it's a great opportunity. It's like, as I said, like it just gives you more options when you keep moving forward. And
Right.
I think from a global point of view, this audience will become very important, because the way we communicate, the platforms that we're using, and traditional corporates don't understand this to a great extent, especially coming from Sri Lanka. They don't know what Discord is. They don't know what Twitch is. And like most of the time when I go and ask for funding from my organization, they're like, I can't believe people watching other people playing games. That's the typical comment I get. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yes,
I
they
hear that
do.
too.
And
Right.
yeah, yes, that's my view on this.
Absolutely. Yeah, I hear that all the time too. I think more people are starting to get it all the time, but my answer, and I'm curious, MVP, what your answer too is when you hear this, because I know you're hearing it all the time as well, is yes, people watch other people play video games, but if you think about it, we also watch other people cook food. We watch
Yeah,
other people argue about politics. We watch other people play traditional sports, but not just play traditional sports. Some of my favorite things to watch are watching other people talk about the sports they watched the day before. And so when you would put it that way, you would say that doesn't make any sense. And what it comes down to is it is relevant entertainment. And so the reason why gamers like to watch other gamers play games is because it's relevant to you and you know what's happening. If you're saying why are people watching people play video games, I'm guessing you don't play video games. And the reason
yeah,
you're confused is because you don't play yourself. And so you're not learning, you're not entertained. I'll tell you, I had a very eye-opening experience years and years ago. And it was after I played golf for the first time. I can tell you, watching golf on TV before I ever picked up a club was the most boring thing in the world. I played with some friends. Actually, my first time playing, I played in a fundraising tournament, which was a whole nother story for another time. But I cannot tell you how much more interesting that afternoon of golf on television was after I had swung the club myself, right? Because I had
Yeah.
experience with it. MVP, I'm curious what you've heard from, or what your experience hearing that.
This show is very interesting to me, because I think what we're talking about is, first of all, early adapters. All right.
Yep.
So I would prefer to be an early adapter and follow the trend anytime, right? And that's what we're trying to always listen for. And John's right. I came to John about 3 years ago and I said, John, I'm getting more people sending me notes from all over the world. We're going to have to figure something out. When we first launched, we really had more of a national plan. And then we went global. Was it about 3 years ago, John?
Yeah, about 3. Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about early adapters, and we're talking about how we can work together on a global level. And of course, this is about staying on court in life, staying in the game. The very last thing my grandfather said to me was, Yahoo me, because he thought Yahoo was going to be email. And he was trying to talk to me through showing me an example of staying current. And it wasn't until I walked away and I thought, that was so smart. He thinks Yahoo means email, like Google means search. So yeah, you're just so ahead of the game. And I'm really excited to share a little bit about what we're doing with our chapters on a global level and what your plan is. So talk to us a little bit about what your 1 to 5 year plan is.
Yeah. So I think the first is about establishing Sri Lanka Trade Association, and really one of the key things is getting the right people into that trade, right, or to the association. So the way I looked at it was, who's the guy who really started driving the sports community? So I've already got him looped in. Then I also looked at someone who was an expert on startups, but not just startups, but also someone who managed to take things out of Sri Lanka. Because Sri Lanka, I always said that we have an island mentality. You kind of don't want to be outside. So I want to be outside because I think that's who I am. So I got someone who's involved in building brands, competing against international brands. I think that's going to give us tremendous exposure in terms of what we need to establish. We are talking to someone from the law side, because I also think there's a policy governance influencing that we need to do, lobbying especially from a trade point of view, and then also someone from most probably from a telecommunication side, because I think the infrastructure is important. So that's going to be the founding board. For the first year, I think it's about connecting with all different stakeholders in Sri Lanka who will have some level of interest from an industry point of view, but also from a country point of view, so that it gives us an opportunity to educate them, get them all lined up. And then the next few years would be around really building membership, getting the corporates to get more involved, and then also having some of the local events from a trade point of view. See whether we can get some of the international folks to come down, to share the expertise. I think education is going to be a crucial role in terms of the trade association. And we, in the past, from other industries, we've had some really successful trade associations. And I think it should come to a point that it enables us to influence the roadmap in the best interest of the community and the country. And that's how I kind of see, that's the vision. That's what, for me, when I want to start the trade association, everyone's like, oh, there aren't any companies involved in gaming and esports the way you are doing. But I think that's the whole point. It doesn't. You get involved and then you learn from it and then you kind of grow with it. That's how I was looking at it. So that's essentially the vision for the Sri Lankan chapter.
And John, what I listened for when I met Amila is his strategy. And if you notice how slow and strategic his build is, how you can really, if you really listen, how in it he is for the whole duration of the plan, which is John's favorite thing. He's constantly pulling me back by my hood.
Yeah, I think it's it's a sign of having a strategy and not just jumping at any shiny object, and having it thought through, right? Is saying, okay,
Yeah.
we're going to do this, and this is going to take a certain amount of time, and then based on that, then we are able to do this, etc. One of the reasons why I love having you in our community, Amila, some of the feedback I heard from the conference, a lot of people came to me and they said, John, this is some of the best networking I've ever had at any conference.
Yeah.
And I think a big part of that, there's two reasons. One is just an others first mentality that our community has, that, hey, we're not just here for ourselves, we're here for our fellow members as well. And we're here to serve and connect, share knowledge, all the things. The other is there are so many different types of people from all over the world, different ethnicities, different genders, but also different expertise, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you might go to some event, both within or outside the esports industry, and it's all the same kind of person, right? It's like we all do partnerships. So we're here to do partnerships. Well, if I got anything else to do or I've got a different interest, maybe you can connect me to somebody, but I can't talk to the person to produce the event or who is the founder of a wearables tech company, for example, or head of a big CPG brand, what have you. And so to lead into this next topic, you are somebody who is the co-founder and CEO of GamerTech, which is a very innovative wearables brand who just announced a partnership with a quite large esports organization in Dignitas. Share with us, what is GamerTech, and then let's lead into this partnership and what that product is all about.
Yeah. So I founded GamerTech with another colleague of mine named Taraka. And what happened was we've been gamers right throughout, right? And then what we also realized that we are getting old, we are having our own set of issues. And we did like a lot of research at the beginning of GamerTech. And it wasn't called GamerTech. We were actually thinking about ergonomics originally. So we used to call it Ergon as a project name. But the whole idea was that we were trained in a very specific way to understand what are the consumer problems and how do you solve those consumer problems. So we kind of do like a very design thinking process in that sense, identify a problem, then try to find solution profiles, and then try to narrow down. So when we did the research, what we found out was like there were 4 main issues most of the gamers go through their life. One is in terms of your hand health. So we kind of combine tendonitis, respiratory strain, carpal tunnel, elbow pains, shoulder pains, everything into hand health. So like almost like 60+% that they suffer at one point, or they feel that their performance is reducing with, when they play for longer. The second one was around posture. Third one was around vision. And the fourth one was around non-communicable diseases related to obesity and bad lifestyle. Then we're like, oh, I mean, there's a lot of people. I mean, I don't look the same way I used to look 10 years ago, right? I was like, this chubby person, just a couch potato, then I kind of got into fitness and stuff like that. But again, I've gone through some of these cycles. So it was a very close subject to my heart. And that's why we started GamerTech. And we were also working for a company which enabled us to sort of do what we wanted. In Sri Lanka, because of where I was, if I went to someone else and said, hey, I have this idea, can you fund it? I don't think we would have got the funding because I don't think they would have understood what I was talking about. But luckily for me, fortunately, the organization that I work for is called MS Holdings. They were very keen on understanding what this opportunity is about. And they were also very keen to invest in us as well as in the project, because they felt, okay, these guys are onto something. We see the opportunity. Let's work with them. So that's how GamerTech started. GamerTech started as something that actually went into almost like medical devices initially. Just to give you a bit of background, we were looking at doing FDA class 1 or 2 products, trying to go. And I was like, this is not for gamers, FDA class 1 or 2 is like, for people who are sick. Gamers are not sick. They don't realize that they're sick. I want to get into wearables. We want to make it more performance driven. So that's how we started building GamerTech. But the value about GamerTech and the core principle that we bring to the table is like anything that we're going to build is going to be very specifically built for gamer pain points, not for anyone else. And one of the things that I see most of the time is that why I love esports is that because most of the time people try to solve the core audience problems, right? They don't come with a solution and say, hey, listen, I have this, I think it's going to work for you, which is kind of not the way to go about in my head. So that's how we started GamerTech. And me, one of the biggest challenges were like, who are the people that I can work with as well? Because, okay, I'm in this country, we don't have too many connects. Whom do I need to connect with? So we started working with organizations like, who are, uh, at that time when I started, there were like very few organizations who were talking about gamer performance health. There are a few that we started working in the past to help us do research to understand, okay, so we have a hypothesis. How do you validate this hypothesis? Working with different people, having focus groups. I remember when we started this journey, we did more than 600 plus screener surveys to understand how do we sort of narrow this audience down. Then we did about 60 plus interviews on our first round of research, apart from the secondary research we've done. And then kind of said, okay, these are the pain points, these are their lifestyle, this is their average income, sort of building all the personas. And then based on that, we started developing solutions. Then we took the solutions to market. We went to things like PAX, we went to things like GDC, Sports Bar, all these things, and then started really trying the product out there in the market. And then we got feedback, and then we kept on iterating those feedback. And then with that, we also started connecting with esports organizers, because we felt, why don't we go and work with the professionals? They can give us more feedback. And so our first partnership we did somewhere into.
Oh, I think we got you frozen up there. Maybe if you want to try, Amila, to close your screen and turn it back on, might work. Or might have to have him go out and back in again. We can always cut this part too. So let me message. All right, sorry everybody, we froze up there for a minute, but we are back with Amila. Amila, please continue.
Yeah. So as I was saying, Oxygen was our first partner, and then we also looked at who are the other organizations that we can work with. So we've spoken to many different esports organizations in the past. I wouldn't want to mention names, but Dignitas was one of the most accommodating, lovely bunch of people, including Mike Prindaville, John Sire, amazing people. We've been in discussion for a while because we also wanted someone who had different titles than Oxygen, who was on not Rocket League, but like someone on League of Legends. So I think it was a good fit for us. And the whole idea of having different esports organizations as our partners were that we could test the different products that we're coming up with. So when I talk about wearables, I'm envisioning a future that is performance boosting, but not just that, but also how can we create unique immersive experiences using technologies like haptic, RGB lighting, so you kind of want to create like a very consuming engagement through different technologies. So that's how we're looking at it. So that's how we kind of got into discussions with Dignitas. I got an introduction through one of our long-standing friends, William Collis. So I work with him directly. So he's a consultant for us. He's the professor of esports who runs the business of esports. And so we got into a discussion. Then we finally managed to do the announcement last week. And it's a big announcement because Dignitas is one of the oldest teams in the industry, and I think they've gone through multiple phases. They've seen the evolution of it. I believe they just celebrated their 20th anniversary. I think we came at the right time, and it's now we're working with a very mature organization who has a lot of different professionals who are working at very different levels, but also having that enthusiasm to get things going. And I think with Dignitas, what will happen is that we will conclude the product development rounds by end of this year, and we'll have the new products coming out beginning of next year. So the plan is to commercialize with Oxygen, Dignitas, getting all the new products coming out to the market, and then really trying to see how the actual market conditions would enable us to, figure out whether you're going to succeed or not. But I'm very hopeful and I'm very excited. And also, we are looking at adding more new partners as well, because there are very specific things that we are looking at. And one of the reasons why I want to do that, it goes back to the earlier point that we were discussing. Most of the time, esports organizations work on sponsorship models and then also tournament winnings. But how can we monetize in other revenue streams? So I think there are revenue streams that are underutilized at this point. And I think by doing some of the things that we are doing, it's going to enable some of the other organizations to start monetizing some of the underutilized revenue streams. So that's how we're looking at it from a business point of view. So the whole, again, Gamertech is all about gamers, but also we try to, our tagline is level up, right? So essentially we want to level up with the partners as well. So how do we do things together to, sort of really bring value? And I think there are like some of the aspects, if you look at most of the, like say apparel side of things, most of the time it's designed for someone else and based on a very different set of consumer problems. But our value prop is how do you build that same apparel around the gamer needs? Someone who's going to play for like 12 hours, 24 hours, 48 hours at, in taking, obviously taking breaks is not healthy. But how do you enable them to sort of, be comfortable, but also like, manage some of the wellness aspects, but also have your performance up all the time, but not really hurting yourself? That's how you're looking at it. And that's why we're also working across, like from an ecosystem point of view, we also have like, build networks around professionals in terms of wellness, then advices around, what the gamers would need, how do we sort of, understand what do they need? Because we are also socially, culturally very different, right? And I think there were like different elements that we were considering when we started this journey, but I'm very blessed to be at this point and then do what I'm doing, from a country that who had never thought about, doing, this kind of opportunity. So I think that's a very unique blend that we've been exploring here.
I love that. Yeah, and I want to read a quote from your press release from James Baker, who's the Dignitas general manager, because I think it says a lot about you what someone else says about you. He says, "We at Dignitas have always committed to not only achieving peak performance, but also ensuring the well-being of our players. This collaboration with Gamertech underscores our dedication to both these principles. Their cutting-edge technology promises to elevate the gaming experience for our players, giving them a competitive edge while also prioritizing their health and longevity in the industry." And wow, what an amazing gift to be able to offer this industry, to say, hey, with these products, we're going to help you with your performance, hopefully, of course, but we're also going to help you with the longevity of your career. How can you, heal from these long and intense gaming sessions? Talk a little bit about, I saw in the press release this beautiful image of a glove, which appears to believe is cryotherapy. Talk a little bit about what that is and how that works.
Yeah, so that's the first product we're looking at introducing, which we call the Magma Glove. So when we started, what we realized was like a lot of assumptions were around that most of the gamers get carpal tunnel. And what we realized, it wasn't really carpal tunnel, it was actually repetitive strain injuries. Means that you're going to have like say 400 to 600 actions per minute, means you're going to have inflamed tendons. So long-term repercussions are tendinitis, but also like it's repetitive strain, right? And we built two different solutions. One was a thermotherapy solution, which you see on Dignitas press release, which we call the Magma Glove. So the whole idea was, how do you use active heating at a very specific temperature, combined with compression to give increased circulation so that your any sort of injuries can heal faster, because you kind of need to deliver nutrients to those damaged areas, right? So that's how we looked at it. So that's the first product we're going to introduce by end. So we are actually announcing this at Esports Awards in November. So we have one of the Collegiate Esports Awards presenting partners there. So we'll be unveiling the new product. So the product would be a little bit more different from what you see on the press release, because this is the earlier generation of a prototype, which we tested out. But the new one actually will have much cooler features coming in. And then again, so we also pegged this product into performance. What we realized was like what you're going to use for, recovery is also good for your performance. And the inspiration came from traditional sports. What do you do when you want to, play any sport, right? You have to warm up properly. If you don't warm up, classic example, if you go to the gym and if you want to do like a free weight squat, you need to warm up to the 1 rep max, right? If you want to do that, you try to do 1 rep max, you're going to burst something, you're going to break one of your tendons. And the whole principle here is that gamers are like traditional athletes. What do you need to give them to enable them to play for longer? Because usually why you get injured is because you suddenly try to, go at a higher click rate than, without warming up. So that leads to a lot of issues, even though they don't realize. And these gamers are also relatively young, right? And the issue is that when you're young, you kind of recover faster, but the problem is the number of cycles you can go through that. the whole idea of Magma is to sort of, enable you to play for longer, but also not hurt yourself in the process. And James himself was a retired League of Legends player, so he understands the pain points. So we actually had a extensive conversation with him. He wore the product. He gave us a lot of feedback, which we are grateful. And those changes are being built into the new version of the product. So that's the Magma glove. We are looking at a cryotherapy glove, which we call Sub-Zero, coming towards next year. Again, the principle there is that post-game recovery, what do we need to give you? So Magma is more in terms of pre-game, in-game, warm-up, performance boosting glove. And then the next version would be more in terms of post-game. There are two types of conditions. You have chronic and acute. So heat therapy is usually good for like anyone who's having chronic conditions. So that means you can recover much faster. And then also cryo is good when you're sort of having any sort of acute condition. That's how we look at it. So we took all this from sports science, but really tweaked it to the gamer performance and wellness aspects. And we worked with 1HP and then another organization to sort of validate this. What we also did was we went to the extent of actually going and doing physical therapy-based testing to understand how they use these gloves and how it really improved their performance. And what we realized was like heating glove actually gave, from a physical therapy point of view, about almost like 50+% in terms of improvement. So they kind of felt, rotations, finger movements, twitch, all that improved quite significantly. Then we also went and tested it in an environment where gamers are used to. We used AimLab grid test to understand how they perform with and without the glove. And then again, it had a significant improvement. We will be publishing a white paper around the research we've done over the years, really summarizing all those things within the next couple of months, hopefully, when we more close to the launch of the new glove. And the whole idea is that this is not another glove that someone came and said, hey, it's a glove that's going to improve performance, but we've actually gone through the whole testing validation to understand whether it actually can give the performance that we are looking at. And that's why I said our whole value is around, principles are around, we want to build something that's going to work for gamers, but also really test and validate in the market with the people.
Well, it's so neat, I think, how you have such a great understanding of the science here and how you have taken and adopted best practices from traditional sports, traditional medicine, how we're seeing, injuries in other industries be prevented and also taken care of. And then you're adapting those in a very nuanced and specific way so it is relevant specifically to gamers. So I really commend you for that. We are at the end of this episode, and it has just been, I've been on the edge of my seat here learning so much from a cultural standpoint, from a technology standpoint, and all that you're doing. Last question for you. How can the folks who are listening follow you and GamerTech in the ways that you would like them to?
Yeah, so you can visit the website. It's gamertech.gg. And also you can follow me on LinkedIn. It's Amila.Pathirana on LinkedIn. I'm also on Twitter. But LinkedIn is the preferred platform because I think that's I hardly look at Twitter. I just go there for like news, but LinkedIn, and then also there's an email address on the website. You can go ahead and write to us. That directly comes to me. But I would love to hear from the folks, because again, as I said, we are on a learning journey, also growing with the industry. So I think it's important that we connect, discuss, debate, explore new ideas, and I think that's what really excites me about the Esports Trade Association as well, because I get to meet people in person. And as I said, I love being in Chicago. I think I saw you at the Radisson Blu lobby, and I said, "Hey, that's John. I've seen him many times. Let me go and say hi to him." It was fun. It's like I recognized everyone the moment I walked in, and it was a very fun experience. And thanks for having me at the EsportsNext. Really, really appreciative of that.
Absolutely. Well, we feel thankful for you and your contribution and all of your involvement with ESTA and the broader esports community. Megan? Congratulations, and thank you for taking the pain out of the game. So yeah. with that, we look forward to seeing you in October. Hopefully we'll make it over to Vegas ourselves. It's a shorter flight.
Yeah, awesome.
All right. Well, thank you, Amila, for joining us today on the EsportsNext podcast.